right, let's set the stage properly this time in English, the way it's spoken around Scotland. With that natural flow, you'd hear from someone a bit fed up, a bit hopeful, and fully invested in what's going on at Rangers. And over the last few days, the atmosphere around Ibrox has felt like one of those moments where everyone realizes the club has hit another major turning point. Not one of those quiet shifts that folk barely notice, but a proper shake of the foundations, the kind that makes supporters stop and think, right? What now? Because the changes behind the scenes have been heavy, and the ripple effect is only just beginning. The departure of key figures working at the top end of the club didn't just land like a regular update. It crashed into the news cycle like a wallop that nobody could ignore. After weeks of frustration building up, after performances dropping short of what's expected, and after months of a direction that never felt fully joined up, Rangers finally drew a line and said, enough was enough. And when decisions like that are made together all at once, supporters know straight away that something bigger must have been going wrong in the background. The timing almost adds to the drama. Just when Danny Röhl had started to bring a bit of calm to the pitch, when the players began to look like a team again and not a group of strangers still figuring each other out, the real storm turned out to be upstairs. Röhl's work steadied the football side, but even that couldn't cover the cracks in the overall structure. Too many poor calls had already piled up, too many signings that didn't convince, too much money going out without the results to justify it. Supporters were feeling it, and the board clearly reached the point where pretending everything was fine was no longer an option. And of course, anytime two big figures suddenly leave their posts at once, the first thing on everyone's mind is what this is going to cost. Because nothing at that level comes cheap. These are roles with long contracts, big salaries, big expectations, and when it all ends early, the payout tends to hit the club hard. That's been one of the loudest discussions among supporters, not only what those exits mean for the structure and stability of the club, but also what they mean for the finances already stretched by a summer window that cost a fortune and delivered very little on the pitch. The summer itself still hangs over everything. It was hyped up as one of the most ambitious periods the club had taken on in years. Talk of big investment, fresh direction, a modern approach. And yet from the very first matches of the season, that optimism evaporated. Signings looked miles off the pace. Decisions felt rushed or mismatched. The squad rebuild, which was supposed to kickstart a new era, ended up feeling like the opposite. So when these departures were finally announced, for many supporters, it almost felt like the inevitable catching up at last. Inside the club, the message is that Rangers are ready to go in a different direction, and by the sounds of it, not a small adjustment either, more like a proper reset. Folk close to the situation have been hinting that the financial outlay involved in ending this chapter could easily run into millions, which only adds to the frustration because the club is still counting the cost of a summer where large fees were spent on players who haven't delivered. And every time supporters hear figures like that, it naturally raises more pressure on whoever comes next, because the margin for error is even smaller now. With the outgoing leadership cleared, Fraser Thornton has stepped in for the moment to hold things together, taking on the role of acting chief executive. He's someone already familiar around the club, someone who's stepped forward during difficult moments before. His return feels like a decision made partly for stability and partly because there aren't many people who can take the reins quickly without adding more chaos to a situation already sensitive enough. But the bigger question, the one everyone is waiting to see answered, is who the new long-term leaders will be. The owners seem determined to bring in strong names, people with proper footballing experience and clarity in decision-making, because the recent mess has shown exactly what happens when the structure isn't solid. Whoever steps in will face a massive task: rebuild confidence, bring unity back to the club, shape a clearer strategy, and reverse the feeling that too many missteps have been allowed to pass without accountability. And that accountability is exactly where a lot of the frustration has come from. Supporters kept watching signings arrive with big price tags and even bigger expectations, only for the performances to fall flat. The situation with the striker brought in for £8 million became almost symbolic of the whole issue, a signing that didn't make sense to many supporters and didn't deliver on the pitch, leading to even more questions about who was deciding what behind the scenes. When transfers fail at that level, it affects the whole club, it affects trust, it affects direction, and this season has shown that clearly enough. So, as this new chapter begins, Rangers find themselves at a crossroads where nothing can afford to be done halfway. The departures mark the end of a troubled period, but the consequences, financial and sporting, remain right there for everyone to reckon with. And while the focus naturally shifts to who will take the next leadership roles, the lingering feeling is that this reset has to be different from the last ones. It has to stick, because supporters have been waiting far too long for a structure that matches the ambition the club keeps talking about, right? Let's carry the story forward from where things were starting to boil over, because even with all the upheaval happening behind the scenes, the impact of these decisions is spilling onto every corner of the club. Supporters are watching closely, players are trying to keep their focus, and the new structure is still taking shape. And in the middle of all that, you've got voices from the past and present weighing in, each one adding a bit more context to the bigger picture of how things reached this point. One of the most interesting perspectives to re-emerge lately has come from someone who knows the club inside out and who found himself right in the middle of the transition period not long ago. During his temporary spell in charge, he was dealing with the same uncertainty and the same lack of clarity that the supporters felt. And now that the dust has settled on the departures at the top, he's opened up about the disagreements that were happening behind the curtain, especially around recruitment. It's the sort of insight that makes everything feel a bit less surprising, even if it doesn't make the situation any easier to swallow. What he's revealed is that the two of them had different views, not just on individual signings, but on the whole strategy. He had ideas about building a stronger Scottish core in the squad, players who understood the league, the mentality, the expectations. Names were put on the table, players like Lawrence Shankland, or even younger Scottish talents who could have come in ready to fight for the shirt, but those suggestions didn't gain traction, and the direction swung toward a different type of signing. Instead, players from abroad with higher price tags and bigger financial risk. And now, looking at how things went, it's no wonder supporters are nodding along to his comments, because when you think back to the summer window and how much money was spent, it's hard not to wince. 14 players brought in, a net spend of around £20 million, and instead of pushing forward, the squad looked like it had taken a step back. Some signings barely featured, others looked lost, and the one who cost £8 million has struggled to make any kind of consistent impression. It's not even about blaming the players. It's about understanding how the club could pour that kind of investment into a rebuild that didn't match what the manager needed or what the supporters expected. He explained that during his interim spell, the communication with the chief executive was solid enough. If he needed something, the door was open. But with the sporting director, the relationship felt distant. A meeting here, a meeting there, and hardly any time together to properly align views, and that becomes a problem fast, especially when the future of the squad is being shaped. He even mentioned that during the interview for the full-time job, he realized they simply didn't share the same philosophy on recruitment, and in football that clash usually ends the same way. You can't build a squad on two different blueprints. His comments tap into something supporters have felt for months: frustration at how the club's structure has operated. So many decisions seem disconnected from the reality on the pitch. So many signings looked like they were made with spreadsheets rather than understanding what the matchday demands actually are. And when leaders at the top have different visions, the squad becomes a reflection of that confusion. That's exactly what played out across the first stretch of the season. He pointed out that a lot of the new players were still sitting in the amber category under the new manager's assessment system. Neither hits nor complete misses, just stuck in the middle, a few greens, a couple of reds, but most floating somewhere uncertain. And that's not unusual during a rebuild, but it becomes a major issue when the club has spent so much money and so many of the new arrivals aren't ready to make the immediate impact that was promised. For a club like Rangers, where every point dropped feels like a crisis, waiting for a squad to slowly settle simply isn't an option. And that's why he believes accountability was always going to fall at the top. If you oversee a wide-scale rebuild, if you spend close to £20 million reshaping the squad, then you carry the responsibility for whether those choices move the team forward or backward. He said it plainly: if the majority of your signings take too long to adapt and the team isn't improving, eventually the spotlight stops moving and lands directly on the person who signed off on everything. And that's exactly what has happened now. He himself felt Rangers needed to follow one direction, one consistent vision. And even though not everyone agreed with him, he accepted that disagreement is part of football. But when the results go the wrong way, when the team stagnates, when supporters lose trust, the consequences become unavoidable. It wasn't just one bad signing or one bad decision. It was the accumulation of choices that didn't match the club's identity, didn't match the intensity of Scottish football, and didn't match the urgency supporters feel every single week. His honesty about the situation adds another layer to the wider picture of why the club decided to act now. It explains why the ownership group felt the need to press the reset button again, even though it will cost the club significantly in the short term. They clearly reached a point where the gap between what they expected and what was being delivered became too wide to bridge. Performance dipped, recruitment missed, and the connection between the leadership and the pitch became threadbare. And while all of this plays out off the pitch, the players still have to carry the weight of expectation onto the field. That's the tricky part of transitions like this. The supporters don't stop demanding results just because the boardroom is being reorganized, the league doesn't slow down, the pressure doesn't ease off. Every match still carries the same intensity, the same scrutiny, the same demand for 3 points. The squad has to perform while knowing the environment around them is changing at full speed. Meanwhile, the search for new leadership is underway, and by all accounts, the owners are determined to bring in people who can make the structure stronger than it's been for years. The next sporting director and chief executive will need to build a clearer strategy, create a unified recruitment plan, and restore belief in the long-term vision of the club. They'll also inherit a squad in transition, a fan base impatient for progress, and a financial reality shaped by the costly decisions of the last year. The feeling around Ibrox now is that this moment needs to be more than just another reshuffle. It needs to be the point where the direction finally stops lurching from one idea to another and becomes something stable, coherent, and built to last. Because supporters are tired of false starts. They're tired of resets that never fully reset anything. What happens over the next few months will shape not just the rest of the season, but possibly the next few years of the club's future. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications to get all the exclusive news about Rangers FC. Don't overlook any details about your beloved team. It's crucial for Rangers FC fans. Whispers have been swirling round the Granite City and the Govan stands alike as word drifts through the Scottish game that Kevin Nisbet has quietly drawn a line under his time at Pittodrie and is now slipping into a fresh shade of blue in the southwest. Nothing's been pinned to an official board yet, but the murmur carries a certain weight, the kind that usually comes from folk who've heard something they maybe weren't meant to. Those close to the Aberdeen setup insist the mood shifted sharply, as if a door that had been held ajar for months finally swung shut. Nisbet, once viewed as a centerpiece for the Dons' forward plans, seems to have stepped away without much ceremony, leaving supporters to piece together the clues: a missed training session here, a muted appearance there, the thin smile of a man halfway out the building. The hints were there for anyone paying attention. Meanwhile, down at Ibrox, the rumble has grown louder by the hour. The talk among the fans, queuing for their rolls and coffee, carries that unmistakable excitement, the prospect of a proven Scottish striker pulling on the Rangers strip. They're not quite celebrating yet, but you'd struggle to find many who aren't already imagining him leading the line beneath the floodlights, shoulders squared, ready to make a mark. Some insiders claim the move was wrapped quicker than anyone expected, almost as if both sides had tired of the waiting. Others swear it's all still under wraps, with only a signature separating rumor from reality. But the story has a momentum of its own now, rolling through pubs, taxis, training grounds, and group chats, picking up detail with every retelling. If the whispers prove true, Nisbet's shift from red to blue will be one of those turns that feels inevitable in hindsight, the kind supporters talk about for years: how they first heard, who told them, and how the whole thing felt like it was happening in the shadows before finally stepping into the light. Whether he becomes the next talisman or just the newest face remains to be seen, but for now the rumor itself is enough to set pulses moving across the city. Greetings, fans. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, as it's greatly appreciated by Rangers FC. And don't forget to share your thoughts on the news in the comments section below. Until the next video, stay tuned.